Hello, everybody. Welcome to School Live. GP Walsh and I, Lisa Berry, are here to help you have a better understanding about the spiritual CEO. Because, this was such a fun thing. So I'm going to bring up these topics and then we're going to dive deeper. But where does spirituality show up in our business? You think, hey, is it separate? Is it not? What are the roles of the archetypes of leadership? And we're going to talk about the different hats of a spiritual CEO and all the ones that they wear. And I'm going to kick this off with sharing with everybody that GP Walsh and I, for the first time, it's our first one. We are now officially published together. We have written a chapter in the Magnetic Entrepreneur. And the chapter is, the whole book is on spiritual CEO. That's the title. We're going to share that with you later in a link and everything. And this, Masters of Wholeness is the snazzy title that GP came up with there. And we do go into the archetypes of leadership. So that was a big one. And this topic was near and dear to me, and I'm looking forward to seeing your comments, is sometimes we think spirituality is separate. Wait, it's not, okay, I'm going to be a CEO and then I'll go to church, or I'll do my spirituality, I'll do my meditation. But really, GP, in the whole chapter, we really discussed this. Where do we find spirituality in our business, entrepreneurial role, CEO role? Like where's it showing up?
Well, unfortunately, for the most part, it's not. This is, you have to understand, this is the way the mind works. It compartmentalizes everything. And when it's in that box, right, it doesn't want to deal with any other boxes, right? And so it becomes very narrow in its focus. Now we get confirmation bias and all sorts of things out of that because it can only see so far. And business, I have plenty of issues with it. But business over the years, at first all it was you have needs, I have needs. You have something to offer, I have something to offer, let's get together and share it, whether it's business. And then we invented money so that we could do it. It's more abstract now. So if I've got a chair and I need potatoes and you've got potatoes, but you don't need a chair, I'm out of luck, right? But with money, we can agree on the relative value of that. And so we can trade for unlike things and everybody still comes out and it works. When you're looking at it naturally from the point of the real human needs that we all have, then the whole system is naturally spiritual because it's organic. It's just it's honoring each other. There's nothing in there about me getting more than you in that model, right? But greed entered the picture. So it became, and the accumulation of property and wealth came into the
and control
equation
and status.
Well, yeah, all of that evolved out of that because status is completely tied to what I got, right?
Yes.
It all started with the idea of property ownership, which grew out of just agriculture, which is, because if I've got a field and my whole life depends on that field, I'm going to protect that field. It's my field, right? Whereas prior to that, the hunter and gatherers, nobody owned the earth. How can you own the earth? How can you own the air, right? It was just, it's inconceivable. So they didn't have that concept of property the way we do. And then all the things that get attached to it, like status and position and control and power and that sort of thing. And so business took on a meaning as that changed, right? So now it became about making money, not just about, and now it's not even about what you provide. Talk to the marketer and say, well, we'll find the market and then we'll decide what product to give them. Or if we don't, and if not, well, we'll just market it really hard and make them want something they don't really need. That's where we've gotten to now.
So we can clearly see with that being the model, how spiritual CEO sounds so like there's so much like cats and dogs, well, not cats and dogs fights, they don't, but it sounds like they shouldn't go together. And I think that's a lot
Yeah.
of people either fear it or they don't want to, they're afraid to attach that word spirituality or spiritual with CEO, with entrepreneur, with making money. And one of the things I really am excited to get into is I think as the title CEO would, you think there's a hierarchy. And then you think, okay, wait, spiritual CEO, how can you take a leadership role and be spiritual? And I would love, because let me know in the comments, you guys, please, if that is something that you feel challenged by, or that you think maybe you have a boss and you think, no, my boss isn't spiritual, but how do we play with that hierarchy and the archetypes of leadership when we have that belief that there's a status that's there?
Yeah, well, one of the big mistakes I've seen in all the business education programs is the what's the word, they've mixed up leader and CEO.
Ooh.
CEO is not a leader. He is an authoritarian dictator. He decides everything. Maybe he'll ask people's ideas, maybe he won't, but even if he does, he is a king. He is a potentate. Right? This is the structure of modern businesses. They are totally hierarchical, right? And so they want to paint a nice, they want to put lipstick on the pig, and he's a leader. No, he's not. I've worked with lots of CEOs, and most are not leaders, right? They have the authority and they use the authority. They don't think they need to inspire, right? Mm-hmm. They'll pay attention to that sort of stuff. They'll pay expensive speakers to come in and talk to everybody about that kind of stuff, but they don't actually do it, right? Because it's systemic. It's in the structure itself, right? And look, if I'm somebody who has sacrificed absolutely everything in my job to get to that pinnacle, I want that power. It means something to me. I've got all the rewards. I've got the authority, right? I've got stock options coming out the yin yang. I don't want to let that go. I have risen to the top of a system. So how is it possible for me to question whether or not the system is sick or not? I can't. Bill Gates doesn't question capitalism. I actually heard him arguing that the rights of intellectual property were more important than people to have the vaccine. Yes. So in order to profit over dead people, fine, because that's more important. That's a value. That's a sick value system. Right? Leadership is something completely different.
I was going to throw this out here, but I don't know if I'm just going to ask it. Do you think if spirituality isn't something we do, but it's something who we are, do you think Bill Gates is spiritual?
Well, it depends on how you want me to answer that. Is he consciously involved in embodying spiritual principles? The answer is absolutely not.
That was very diplomatic and nice.
Economics is his value system.
Oh, the value
Capitalism system is his value system. It is what he values most. Mm-hmm. It's what he considers to be the most important thing. I'm going to lower this down a little bit, get in the way of the light.
I like that you're talking about the value system, and then respect. A lot of people think, she or he is the CEO, so we have to respect them, or once I'm the CEO, I'll have their respect.
Well, yeah, that's a classic egoistic approach, that I gain my status or sense of well-being from external conditions. So if I attain those conditions, then now I'm valuable, right? And you can see the mental distortion in that. You can see how that's not at all true. And spiritually speaking, it's a huge mistake, because you're looking for something. You're looking for happiness where it isn't, and you're never going to find it there. Right?
It's fair to say that a spiritual CEO is happiness. Because we're not seeking, but we're back to the happiness thing again. The roles of the archetypes of leadership. I love that you so clearly defined right off the bat there, right off the gate, that CEO is very different than a leader. There's no need to inspire. I mean, there can be. So if a CEO, spiritual CEO, they are inspiring, they are helping to end conflict, resolve conflict. Are they, or is it just impossible?
Well, the CEO can, right? I mean, it could be a leader. Remember, the CEO is a designation within a system. So, and a leadership is not. There's no, CLO, Chief Leadership Officer. There's no such thing, right? That's a characteristic of the heart and the individual, right? Buddha was an incredible leader, right? But he had zero power over anything, right? There was no autocrat, no top-down hierarchical government. There was no government at all. Same thing with Christ, right? Their leadership simply came out of their vision, and people followed that vision willingly, and not under duress. And the vision was so powerful that it even transcended the individual through which the vision came. If you're truly a leader, the vision is leading, not you. You're being led by the vision, and you happen to be standing in line and have the ability to speak or to communicate or to explain. Well, then, okay, you're now in that role of the explainer of what is where you're being led, but the direction isn't being determined by you. Nobody creates their own vision.
Nobody great. You started getting fuzzy, and I don't know if it's the mic or if I don't think my speakers. Did anybody hear it's got hissy and fuzzy?
Did it get hissy and fuzzy?
Yeah, sorry.
Is my speaker having a hissy fit? How about now?
Oh, it's definitely the mic though, because now
Probably
you've
the
corrected
cord.
it. Yes, there we go.
Okay, good.
Good. Okay, so and thank you guys. We like to in Ohm School here, Ohm School Live. We like to. I am reading the comments because I feel that this is such. There's so much fear of positioning and status, and I'll lose this. So the spiritual CEO and these beautiful archetypes of leadership, when they put each hat on, it's not really a different hat. So let's just say let's talk about the open door policy. I like this one. So the CEO's there, they have the open door policy, and so there has to be trust that's developed, so somebody can go in and speak with the CEO. What would the spiritual CEO? How differently would they show up than, let's call it the traditional? Although I hate saying that, the traditional CEO, the non-spiritual CEO, the non-embodiment CEO.
Well, we're always working within the systems, right?
Yes.
Human beings, we create systems to organize, and there's value in that, because if I create a system, we agree on the rules, then we'll go by those rules, and it's more orderly. So it makes sense to be able to do that. The problem is when the rules become sacrosanct, right? And it's like the person who gets elected to office and they think they're the office. I'm important now because I'm the president or something, and the office is important, not you. Right? You are completely interchangeable. Right? And so it really becomes the individual value system, spiritual integrity, and spiritual maturity of the one who occupies a position that within the culture has authority. Right? Now, it does not have absolute authority, and that's one of the big mistakes, right? I mean, they see them. I mean, that's why you have all these billionaires who think they know how the education should be run. This is how healthcare should be run. This is what we should be doing with technology, and they're not qualified for that, right? They shouldn't be making those decisions. They know how to work a system that is geared for people like them to work it.
Yes.
And they misinterpret that as they're some kind of visionary and the like, and it's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. So there's a need to an underlying need to understand the difference between personal integrity and spiritual growth and the systems in which they work. And when you conflate them, you get an ideological point of view. You don't just get a system anymore that we can mold to our needs as time changes. You get a dogmatic, absolute ideology that can't be broken. And so capitalism now is a religion. It is a religion.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not just a system that we can assess the results and go, did it work or didn't? And because, of course, if we do, we see that it didn't work. It failed miserably, especially during the COVID thing. But I don't want to turn this into just a rant about that. It's because we've conflated two things that are actually very different, right? And so the personal integrity, the amount of compassion and wisdom and love that somebody brings to the position is what will determine whether or not that position gets morphed into something that serves people or exploits them.
Ooh, that was a very good, yes, serves or exploits them. Yes. Yeah. If somebody's showing up, because we have in your teachings, you have a course, we talk inner reconciliation. That's the big one, guys. And this is really where our own, we get to, inner reconcile conflicts that are going on. And in any role in business, so many conflicts come up because we're dealing with all the archetypes. And some of you may be familiar with some of these, some of you may not be. We'll have you fill in the blanks here. But if we start right from the beginning with the tribe and who we are in our, if we are embodying the spiritual model, values, and is there a line that divides our tribe, like from outside life, family life, to colleagues, to teammates, team players? How does the tribe show up there?
The tribe really symbolizes the most fundamental aspect of life, which is survival. And we work our jobs. If you're fortunate enough to do something you really love to do, you're very, very fortunate, right? You still have to do something. Within the system that we've created, we have some kind of job, some kind of interchange so that I can survive. I mean, only a small percentage of us are farmers and can actually live off the land. Most of us go to the grocery store and we eat the orange, have never seen the tree, right? So the archetype of the tribe, so if I'm sitting there and I'm the spiritual CEO, I recognize that at the most basic level, everybody that I'm working with has that interest at heart. Now, if I'm really devious, I can force them into a position where they feel their safety feels more and more threatened, and then I will get more and more control over them. I start laying people off. The people that are left, all of a sudden they're working 10, 20 hours a week more. They don't want to lose their job. So I'm squeezing that. I mean, in fact, that is exactly what has happened. I think since the 1970s, worker production has increased like 77%, salary 12%.
Yeah.
So this is the squeeze. This is the squeezed, get more, and this is the exploitive. This is the false king, and I'll talk about the king in a second, right? But underneath there is that. Now we can either guarantee that, like there's that Dan Wright, I think is his name. He's got this company. It's a payment processor kind of company, and he worked out. Well, the long story short is he set the minimum wage for his company is $70,000 a year, and it doesn't matter what your job is. That's the minimum wage.
Okay.
And it is unbelievably profitable. I mean, it's like through the roof, the whole energy of it. When Rush Limbaugh called him a socialist, and right, because it's exactly the antithesis. He recognized something, whether it was conscious or not, that if people feel safe, you get the creative juice from them. Right? If they don't feel safe, all that energy is going into self-protection. They're looking for other jobs. They're looking around. They're trying to do everything they can to avoid being seen. They won't put an idea forward because they're too much at risk. Right? And so, but the more safe we feel, the more creative energy flows. And the one who sits at the center of that is the archetype of the king, which isn't in my chakra archetype list. It's kind of a different kind of thing. And the ideal king, and it's really beautiful because the CEO represents the false king, and the leader represents the true king, right? The king in his shadow, you get the dictatorial CEO. The king in his light, you get the benevolent leader, right? And the king as an archetype was the center that united all of the aspects. It was the center of the quartering of the universe. The cross is a symbol of the king in the center, and this is the realm, which is why you get the royal we. The king does nothing for himself. I am the people. I am the country. So every decision I make is that. Mm-hmm. Now the false king is exactly the opposite. It's like Scar from the Lion King, right? Yeah. They don't have a rightful claim to it, and so it becomes completely ego-driven. It's about them, right? And so when I'm the true king, I recognize people's needs and I meet them, both the collective needs and the individual needs. I recognize the need for, somebody wants to do a good job. They don't want to just survive. They want job satisfaction. They want to feel creative. They want to feel like they're making a contribution. So if I understand that whole hierarchy of needs, all of the different archetypes that are at work at people, I can make sure all of those are fed. That's a real leader. Mm. The vision being holistic. It's what I've said before, it's the whole person, right? Recognizing the whole person and not just squeezing them for what you can get out of them for the least amount of money, right, is the difference between the true and the false king. It's the difference between a CEO and a leader, which isn't to say a CEO can't be a leader, but I just want to keep making the point. Mm-hmm. The CEO is an organizational position, right? The leader and the one who occupies that position will either be a true leader or a false one.
I love that you brought the royal we. My family used to say that to us growing up, and it always made us feel good. Yes, because we were the children and they were the parents, of course, but there was still that inclusivity. It was the royal we, you know. So, and that included when you messed up too, by the way. So
it's the royal we. Yes,
it's
that's
the royal
right.
we.
We messed up, didn't we? Yes.
It became really cute, actually.
Well, you have to remember, when something went wrong in the country, right? They didn't basically lay off the citizens, right? Right. If it was prosperous, it was because the king was blessed. If it wasn't, it was because the king was cursed. It was the action of the king that determined the well-being of the realm.
Yes.
Right? And so he couldn't just say, well, okay, we're just going to lay off, these 18 villages and that'll solve the problem. Right? That's right. So that's the modern guy is not the king.
Is that perhaps sometimes and I'm inviting the comments on this one. I really love to get some feedback on this. Do you think some people what conflict in which archetype would represent someone who is afraid to be the leader because of that responsibility, because of that implied you messed up or yay, you did it. It's all, and now you have to maintain that level. Like there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, well, there is always a pressure to perform. Yeah. And
where would that conflict be if somebody's afraid to step into that level?
Well, let's say it's an essential fear. Okay, can I do it? Am I capable of doing it? Will I be criticized? Will the people I used to work with not like me anymore? Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of personal things that go around, and that's really all just the fear of rejection, the fear of being ostracized from the group, and then just the natural fear of I'm going to do this. Am I going to do a good job? I've never done it before, right? Will I be able to step into it? And some people have a lot of bravado. Yeah, no problem. They just step right in the type A kind, right? But most people, they take with a certain degree of humility, uh, something like that when they want to step in, and it's always difficult. Then again, there can also be a very realistic assessment of it, right? Because with every increase in promotion comes greater responsibility. And again, one of the aspects of the system that makes it sick is that the person needs to sacrifice their personal life for the sake of the organization. And so, I mean, it's just, CEOs usually are crappy fathers. I mean, they just don't have a relationship with the kids. Because, I mean, it really demands, everything from them. Their whole life is whether or not they raise that stock price.
Right. Would that be the storyteller and in kind of conflict with not just the nymph for the freedom and fun, and then storyteller saying, no, the story is being told that you can't have a family life and personal time if you
Yes.
this
Yes, that's a cultural story. Right?
cultural story.
That's a cultural story that you sign up for when you go down that track, right? There are all sorts of things that come with it, right? If you're going to take your company public and do an IPO, you're going to have to sell your soul to Goldman Sachs. You simply cannot do it any other way. They control the stock exchange. They control the door, right? Which means you're going to have to use their companies for your computer system. I mean, there's a whole long list of things that have to be there in order for that to happen. So you at every step of the way, you are signing up for stories. Right.
Oh, good one. Oh, that's such a good one.
When you see it in those terms, you recognize that it's a cultural bias. That's all it is. And when I do that, this is what my life is going to be like. Now, are the rewards equal to the sacrifices? Because there's always trade-offs, right? Some very rational people will look at it and go, yes, well, like Dan Wright. Somebody said Dan Wright was his hero, the guy who did that. He was having a conversation with an employee who was just getting minimum wage and that sort of stuff, and he's got $1 million plus salary going on. And he actually worked it out, so his salary came down to almost $70,000 a year too.
Really?
He worked it out. Yeah. Now that's the kind of intelligence that says, no, the benefits of doing that outweigh what's going to cost me. Right.
Yes. Yeah. That would make me wonder, like hopefully pulling in all those thoughts that everybody's having. You mentioned, if you have to know what you're signing up for and do, the sacrifice and the benefits, does a spiritual CEO then have to be like so savvy to know this ahead of time? Like I would get a little nervous at first thinking if I was hearing this going, oh my gosh, what happens if I don't recognize the sacrifices? And now I'm in there. I'm wow, I've made a mistake maybe, or I don't like this story anymore. I don't want to sign up.
When you're in a position like that, the spiritual teacher, the spiritual anything is a generalist.
Generalist.
Yeah, the technician knows their one thing really, really well, and you need them because that's what they do. But the leader is a generalist. It has to understand everybody and what their motivations are. It has to understand psychology. It has to understand theology. It has to understand medicine. It has to understand some degree of quantum physics and the nature of the structure of things and cognitive bias. You need to understand human behavior if you're going to lead, right? So you have to understand. It's twofold. On one hand, I have to have a vision of somewhere worth leading somebody to, right? Which means I have to cultivate that. And then I have to have, as Buddha put it, the skillful means for actually communicating that and bringing people to it. Right? Well, that's what the spiritual teacher does. Right?
Oh, communication. Is that more of the storyteller? That's when we've experienced or we've done this inner reconciliation with the storyteller. Does that then make us or allow us to be a better communicator?
If the storyteller archetype, the storyteller energy in us, is liberated from the ego, the answer is yes.
Mm.
If it's under the control of the ego, the answer is no. It's just going to be telling the story that binds people. And so the spiritual transformation must take place. As I talk about the chakra model, the lower three chakras represent the unconscious. They represent our instinctive nature. And they are not capable, like an animal, it's not capable of assessing its own conditioning, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the human being, something has to come to the point where it can look at conditioning as conditioning and then step into the spiritual birth, which is the other phase, which the upper three represent, and the crossover point is the heart, where I now can see conditioning as conditioning, right? I now have access to a vision that hasn't been confined to the conditioning, right?
Mm.
Which allows me then now to bring that vision back and use the conditioning to transform the environment. So I can now direct new stories through that mechanism of the storyteller mind. But I have to get out of it first.
That right there, you guys, I think that last minute of what you just shared could be its own course. I truly believe this too. Yes, from the conditioning, I love that, separating from the ego and then bringing it back. So I love how we're not looking at conditioning as this evil thing. Once we explore it, are aware of it, and have that inner reconciliation. And this is why I love when we were writing this chapter that you really included those archetypes. I think that's a very helpful place to go with all of this. And one of the archetypes here is also the visionary. And you mentioned earlier, I wrote it and I can't say it. We don't create the vision. We align to it, or we see the vision, and then we step into it. So what is the visionary archetype doing in this leadership role? How can they, I'm going to be funny here, how can they tap into the vision because of the tapping that we do?
Yeah. Just to be clear to everybody, when we use the term archetypes, what I'm referring to are just aspects of consciousness. They're a technique, a mythological technique, or a psychological one, because Jung used them a great deal. And they represent aspects of ourselves. Most of the time, when we think about ourselves, it's all jumbled up into this big mess. But if you could take one little part out of it and look at it, right, all by itself, you can get some energy behind it, right? Like the energy of altruism is very different than the energy of self-survival, right? And yet we have them both. Now, if they're all mixed up, we get very, very confused, and that's what, conditioning just kind of goes unconsciously. But if we become conscious, there's no way I can get rid of, or would want to get rid of, this drive for survival. But at the same time, I have this altruism that's also very real. They seem to be at odds with one another. So how do I reconcile them? And that's what inner reconciliation is all about. One of those archetypes that I use is the visionary. We all have a sense of what we would like the world to be like, right? Now, you didn't create that. You just didn't decide one day I was going to have that. It was inherent in us. Look at children. They're doing it all the time. It's completely natural to us. When we get stuck in the lower three, the unconscious, that vision gets confined to what's allowed by the conditioning. And so our vision is never free. It's always guarded with what's possible. You've all had the experience of going, well, I'd really like to have that. And in a nanosecond, your mind goes, well, how are you going to do that? Man, that's really hard. I don't know if you can do that, right? That's the conditioning, shutting down the vision, right? And that's the dominance of safety, because a vision is always disruptive. It's always a threat to the system. Always, right? Because it isn't here yet. It's something beyond. And so liberating that inner visionary requires stepping out of the unconscious, and also not wanting to grab onto, this is the life I want, because that's really just an extension of the ego. That's just the storyteller looking for a better story. The true vision is something that it's spontaneous, it's inspired, it just comes. And it arises out of this feeling that we all have. We all know in our hearts that the world can be better than this. That we can make a better place that is harmonious, that takes care of everybody, that is free of war and poverty and all of the stupid things that we all know it intuitively. That's the visionary. And nobody taught you that. You just know it, right? It's self-evidently true. And of course, it is the visionary that finally gets the beatific image, the image of the ultimate of God. It's the visionary that sees God.
You mentioned earlier about children. Children do this all the time, and I think the world would be managed maybe even a little nicer if we let children be CEOs. Like, because they're always saying, well, why are they hungry? Why they can have mine, like they're very until
exactly they have that's very natural. They're very natural in terms of sharing, right? They've not been infected with this ideal that somehow says guarding my possessions is more important than everybody having enough. It's an insane idea, but it has taken root, and it is now the global system.
Yeah, that's actually one I wanted to bring up is we have that the tribe, the security, and then the scarcity, like what you mentioned about laying off, if somebody was going to lay off, and that might be very fearful to one employee person, but not to another. And is that because let's say I was like, but I can get a job elsewhere, but the other person's like, I can't get a job elsewhere. I need this. So we're all going to have inner conflict with different aspects of ourselves based on our conditioning.
Yes, I mean it's a combination of conditioning and your own individualized character, right? It's whenever you're talking about about fear, it's going to be conditioning.
Okay.
Yeah, almost always, unless there is really a threat to your life, an actual imminent threat to your life. That's the only fear that isn't determined psychologically or emotionally.
And the spiritual CEO, being a true leader, a true king, will they be able to assist or point and guide the team who is having conflict with these issues, or is that up to us? As in our lives, we just have to know how to look and
Well, it's both, obviously. But if it's a true leader, what he's doing is, the ultimate leadership is leading people into self-realization, into self-actualization, right? To do it for them, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. So you want to cultivate other leaders. As a teacher, I don't want students. I want teachers. I want them to leave me. I want to be fired.
We don't need you anymore.
I want to be a picture on the wall. Remembered every now and then.
Aww.
Yeah, I mean it's insane. It's insane because I'm not going to be here the whole time. So, to carry these things on, you want the best ideas to be perpetuated. And so to cultivate other leaders, knowing full well they're going to leave and go off on their own, but that's how the culture of the society as a whole is improved, right? Yes. Is when there's an ongoing pool of experienced spiritual maturity that begins to be influential.
Yes. I haven't done this for a long time, so I'm going to sneak this in. I haven't had a cat story for a while, but this is 10 years ago. I was a bit more of a newer cat mom, and I was hiring nannies for the cats and pet sitters and things, but I was leaving all of these notes and videos on how to do this, and they like this, and can you do all this? And so I actually put together a manual. So I had but because, and I'm bringing this up because I didn't just want to teach that one, first of all, because I was going through a few of them, hard to find good help these days. Anyways, I created a manual to share, and people actually, so I had actually some professional pet sitters request that I publish this, or can they pass it on? Because I wanted to share, I guess, as being the leader there, I could feel what felt good, and they really enjoyed it. So I love that you said, you're not just looking for students, forever students. You're looking for students who will evolve and transform. Maybe is the word.
Yeah.
Have the
Yeah.
transformation, and then want to share it with others.
Yeah, everybody has a vision. So if I get access to that vision, and it begins to generate energy throughout the system, it begins to bring about transformations that aligns all the rest of us to the vision. And the ultimate vision, of course, is to know yourself as you actually are. All of this are stepping stones to that. And the more you know who you are, the more you know who everybody else is, the more you understand human nature, the more you can compassionately and lovingly be with human nature and give people what they need, and create an environment that is conducive to human growth and not so one-dimensional. Right? I mean, the workplace should be happy for everyone. Everybody should be sharing in the profits. Everybody should be making decisions. I don't think there should be corporations. I think everything should be a co-op. That's pretty radical, but I think all businesses should be owned by the people who work there.
Yes, and I love the word co-op. Yeah, for every reason.
If Ford had been managed by the workers, they wouldn't have closed down all the plants and moved it to Mexico and destroyed Detroit. All of the car manufacturers. The workers wouldn't do that.
Right.
They need to keep it open. They would be open to the best ideas. I mean, it would be a completely different world, because the health of the individual and the health of the organization, the health of the group would be primary, not the profits of a small group of people on Wall Street.
That was beautifully said about that's a spiritual CEO to me, is when it's the health of all of those, the community, the people.
The king determines the health of the realm. So
Yeah.
the true leader would be creating an environment that makes an entirely healthy realm, not just adding to his own riches. That's Louis the 16th, right? And we pretty much know what happened to him. He was beheaded. He was beheaded in public. Yes, that was the French Revolution.
Oh,
Because it was nothing but, people have no bread, let them eat cake. I mean, it was the wealth of the country was going right into one place.
oh,
Right?
yes, yeah,
And it's happening here, but
yeah. And I'd like to I'm gonna invite people to check out the chapter. You can also, first of all, I'm gonna do two things, and I didn't tell you first about the GP, but I'm gonna do it anyways. They go. First of all, we would love if you were able to support this book, because there are so many other people who've written their chapter on what being a spiritual CEO is, and each one of those chapters are a beautiful story, and there's something to learn from everybody. So we're sharing and teaching. So if you are able to, and you would love to purchase that book, we're going to put up a link, and it's really a nice, easy one. It's gpwalsh.com/SPCEO. And there you go. Spiritual CEO.
yes.
However, I'd like to add on to this. If you are just unable to, and this is not your thing financially, whichever it is, just let us know, private message us, and we will send you our chapter. So you can still
we get you our chapter.
you can still read it. It's really good. It's that GP's done a lesson in there, of course. It's good as the teacher.
It is a collaborative work. So I think there's 13 authors total, and of course, we did commit to promoting it. So
yes, Robert J. Moore, and that's completely magnetic entrepreneur, and share with us. I'm curious to see. Who here, who's watching, if you're watching the replay or with us right now, are you an entrepreneur? Are you a CEO? Are you an employee? What is your role? And are you happy in there? Do you feel like any conflicts are coming up as we discuss these different areas? Maybe you don't like your CEO. I don't know. Maybe we can help you with some of these challenges. Work consumes our lives, it seems, so it's what dictates our days every day. And we finally, we need vacation. Yeah, actually, we have not talked about this. I'm going to bring this one up. Does a spiritual CEO truly ever need a vacation, goes on vacation, if it's done balanced, in a balanced way?
Well, the potential is there that wouldn't need to be the case. As long as we have the current system that we have, then getting time away from it is going to be necessary. No matter, even if you love what you're doing and the like, refreshing, corporate retreats and all those kinds of things are absolutely necessary, because the system places an energetic demand that is unnatural for people. It's an unnatural structure. Yeah. that we're dealing with. If it was a natural one, there'd be no need for a vacation.
Right. Like farmers don't take off from their crops.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, I mean, I saw a wonderful video on work, the history of work, and modern people, we talk about all the conveniences. We work harder than any of our ancestors. Even the serfs that worked for the vassals, right, were off 5 months out of the year.
Yeah.
The hunter-gatherers worked 15 hours a week. And as a result, we got language, we got music, we got art. Yes. Hello.
Drum circles.
Yes, I mean, it's like we got storytelling. I mean, so many things.
The bonding.
We weren't spending all the time on survival. We had reached a particular level. Yeah. And that's what it's become, and that's just the squeeze, and that's pure greed. It's just pure greed. Greed is is endemic. It is in the system itself.
Yes, I was going to say greed is actually part of the structure now, and it's become a thing. And that was so interesting. There's so many things running through my head right now. I want to make sure I get all this in here. If we could change the structure, are we changing the structure the more we step into our spiritual CEO role?
Well, as you step into the role of one who is a spiritual thinker, one who ponders, and a spiritual seeker is somebody who wants to answer the existential question: what is the source of all this? What is the reality behind everything we're experiencing? Why are things going the way they are going, and what is the nature of existence? Those are spiritual questions. That one is more than willing to question the validity of all systems. It knows that all systems are temporary creations. Mm-hmm. Period. And when they're no longer useful, you alter them, you fix them, or you throw them out and make something else, because the systems serve us. But when power structure gets into place, we end up serving the system, and that's the difference that happens. So a spiritual person is transformative and disruptive by nature, because nothing that no longer serves a purpose is allowed to stand, and because there's no personal attachment to any of those things, anything is fair game. Anything can be changed or removed, because they are just things we created to help us. If they're not helping us anymore, get something else. Now, it sounds so perfunctory, but it's a very spiritual perspective, and the reason it's spiritual is because I don't have a vested interest in holding on to this, but the ego does, because my personal position is there, my own status, my wealth, all of this is tied up in it. So I'm going to hold on to that system, even though I know it doesn't serve anybody but me.
Yes, that's another whole chain that just kind of fit all those pieces together. It's spiritual when we don't have that attachment. That's the ego stepping in and saying, I must, or I think, or it can't be changed, or it can't be done differently, just to backtrack on, if it no longer serves the whole, it's just serving one. So no, maybe it's not serving anybody. Okay, so the system's there, it's serving no one. Everybody's in trouble. There you go. is it the leader who will recognize it and dismantle it, or will that system just naturally crumble?
Well, it happens both ways. Sometimes a visionary leader can emerge and lead out of the mess. Uh, Other times it just falls apart because the vision doesn't get heard, right? And this is the nature of all empires. They eventually crumble under their own weight. Some of them transform, right? But those are pretty rare. Most of the time the inertia behind a structure like that is so powerful that the only thing it can do is burn itself out, and it just collapses under its own weight, which is followed by a period of a bit of chaos, and then something new reorganizes behind it, right? So, yeah, I mean, it either way. I certainly prefer to be gently guided out by an inspired leader than to just have my world collapse.
Right.
But as we can testify in our own lives, oftentimes we don't listen until they do.
Right. Yes. Yes. It gets louder and louder, as they say.
Yes.
If we're looking at our lives right now, and we're our CEO, we're doing our thing, and we recognize that I need to be let out of this, whether I'm leading myself through self-inquiry work, doing inner reconciliation, and we say no more. I'm going to quit this job, or I'm going to take on a different role. What is it we need to help us to do that? Because I'm imagining right now, like, oh, you know what, my job is horrible for me. It's not serving me. I'm going to quit, and then I quit, and then maybe which work is it that I still need to do to know, so that I don't get myself into the same trouble again?
Well, that can happen, right?
Yep. Honesty.
And again, I don't really think anybody makes a mistake about that. Sometimes I'm going to quit and everything's going to be good, and you quit and then nothing's good and it becomes a deeper struggle. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There's lessons to be learned in all of it. There's a message in all of it. I tend to, when people are on the path of spiritual transformation, and what happens, of course, is that as the transformation is taking place, your likes and dislikes change, your relationships change, the things you're interested in are change, things that really turned you on before are totally flat. And there can be this drive, I've got to get out of this, I've got to get out of this, I've got to get out of this. We have to recognize that drive to get out of it is part of the conditioning. And you need to be with it long enough that it has a chance for that to transform into some kind of a vision, some kind of a direction. And it can be a very slight one. It doesn't have to be a huge one. So I am never, there are those people out there who say, just, hey, put it all in the credit card and this course is going to do it all for you. Or quit your job and, drop in, drop out, or was that? and I don't do that to yourself. Don't put yourself in a situation where all of a sudden you're filled with fear and you're back to survival, trying to struggle to get by. If you've got some space, use the space, and use that, but dedicate the time to the internal and the external exploration. What else can I do? What would turn me on now? What would make the difference? And if we're just I don't like this, and I pull away from it, right? Then I'm liable to end up with something that I'm going to like less or just as little, because I'm not really going to be open to the bigger possibilities or to options. I have to spend enough time in the discomfort to get some clarity out of it. Right?
I love that you I was going to exactly re-highlight that. You to spend enough time in the discomfort to figure it out. And I want to show, when I was had my first office job, when you're little and you don't really know anything yet, and you just got this job, and one of my jobs was to hole punch paper, but I never really used a hole punch. I mean, it's so simple, but I didn't stay with it long enough to. What happened was all my hole punches were not even, and everything. And of course, it didn't sit nicely in a binder. And I was like, I was belittled about. It was funny. They said, you can't even do this right. And now it's all uneven. And so I made it, my storyteller said, I cannot use this hole punch. I'm just a messy, chaotic person. So therefore my papers are. I was so uncomfortable. I didn't stay with it long enough. I quit because of this. But really, I didn't know there was a stupid guide on the hole punch. And then all you had to do was
line it up.
I was trying to do my own thing there. And so had I stayed with it just a little longer or had that maturity, which I didn't have at the time, to say, I don't know how this thing works, obviously. Can you show me or something? But this is such a basic thing. But I took that with me for years, that I didn't know how to use a hole punch and wouldn't be able to get anything straight. It was for so long. But that was like, yeah, I love it. So stay in that discomfort long enough and do that self-inquiry work and find out, is it just my ego saying to get out because I'm embarrassed and feel stupid, or I don't like it, or is it truly, this isn't for me, I'll be much more creative elsewhere. Yes. And yes, let the vision appear.
You can't be reactive with it, because the reaction is also the ego. Yeah. So you have to be willing to be with the discomfort long enough for some degree of wisdom to show up.
That was perfect. That's the quote.
Which it will. Which it will, if you stay with it, right? You can't show up if you just run off to the next thing. I used to do that when I was young, and just one thing after another. And then I found myself in circumstances where I couldn't. And oh my God, was that unpleasant. But that's how I learned, right? I couldn't do it myself, so life just kind of forced me into a position where I had no choice. There was no way out.
Yeah, you backed yourself into a corner.
Yeah.
Literally.
Literally. Yeah.
I think just this whole topic of the spiritual CEO is just so enlightening, because oftentimes we'll spend a lot of time on our relationships. What they did this wrong and I did this wrong, and and when it comes down to our careers and our jobs and our roles, we really have just made it so much just about the money, security and safety and status, and having this conversation around it, I think is very necessary, and it helps the whole. It helps all of it. So I'm really happy with that.
Well, business needs to be transformed, right? Before we just kind of get rid of the whole system, because it has taken over the world, right? Countries no longer are sovereign. They are all under the rule of large corporations. Nobody could foresee everybody could see the different organizations of government, right, to sovereign states and all that kind of stuff. Nobody could foresee something else emerging that would be more powerful than the states, but had no responsibility for the states. I mean, a country at least has to put on the appearance that it's doing stuff for its people, right? Corporations do not have that. They have no obligation whatsoever to anyone except the stockholders. And they control countries. So we're dealing with a completely different power structure in the world that has never existed before. And we still are fighting, the Democrats and Republicans are fighting it out as if they had real power. They don't. They're both controlled by the same thing. And it's all theater. We keep acting as if, it's the government doing this. No, it isn't. The government's doing what it's told. And so we have to understand that even getting a really good person getting elected to office is going to have zero to minimal effect, because the system itself is totally corrupt. They will either be bought or they will so marginalized that they'll have no effect whatsoever. So the systems that require transformation are businesses. They are corporations. They are these structures that are just sucking the life out of people's souls. And I've actually been talking to a few people about doing some interreconciliation, adapting it for companies. Yes. Because it's the place where, look, frankly, we talk about spiritual entrepreneur. Most people do not have the ability to be an entrepreneur. It's a unique kind of thing, Like not everybody can play in the NBA, right? It's not a slight, right? I'm 5'7". I have no athletic ability. I can't play in the NBA, right? NBA, right? So so not everybody, most people actually need an environment to grow into to the point where they could do something on their own. And unless they've gotten enough experience and exposure to different kinds of things and developed confidence, which means working for somebody who has vision, right? They can then step out on their own. Most people are simply not prepared for it, right? And so this kind of transformation of turning corporations into a place, into a place that is positive for human life and for the life of the earth. They simply have to be transformed, and or done away with.
From corporation to co-op.
Yeah, I can't remember that there's a name of it. It was formed in Spain after World War II when Spain couldn't get anything. They just couldn't get any kind of services or anything. So a priest and like 7 people in the town formed this co-op. It still exists. It is the most successful co-op in the entire world. It starts with an M. I can't remember the name, if anybody can. Nobody can compete with it. Other competitors have been they've tried to compete with it, and nobody can compete with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
You have to look that up. I like that.
And there's a whole movement by Dr. Richard Wolff, who's an economist, called Democracy at Work. And he's all for democratizing the workplace because it isn't democratic, it's autocratic. So anywhere where you take yourself, I don't care if it's a PTA meeting or if it's your local preschool, if it's just at home in the family, anywhere where you bring in this kind of spiritual principle of cooperative and collaborative transformation, looking at things from the point of view not just of do they work for one particular metric, but do they work for the whole? Are they really an enhancement to the quality of human life and the survivability of the planet? If that's the criteria, you are a spiritual leader, and I don't care where you are.
I love the master of wholeness. That was beautiful. If anybody watching, if you would love to have GP come in and speak with your company, where you work, where you lead, wherever that, we are opening that up as well. So that would be fantastic to hear from you. Yeah. And that is going to conclude our spiritual CEO segment here on Homeschool Live today. And thank you everybody who's showing up. We love that you're here, and we love that you're here, and just seeing you and having everything. So thank you, GP. That was just very, very enlightening.
Thank you.
Thank you.